Welcome back to episode 142 of the RUDIS Wrestling Podcast. Today we're switching things up a little bit. We're talking to one of the most dominant UFC champions of all time. And if you're into UFC and the MMA, you're very familiar with this guy's dominance, but you're equally as familiar with the heartache he's had to battle through in the last 4 years. Today we've got two-time UFC bantamweight champion Dominick Cruz on the show. This guy is arguably the best lightweight, bantamweight in UFC history. But one stat that really defines his fighting career is he went a decade. Think about that. A decade without experiencing a defeat in the octagon. I mean, that really blows my mind. But in the past 4 years, he's literally had to battle through every conceivable injury you can imagine. He's had 2 blown out knees, a blown out shoulder, a broken forearm. And I know when a lot of times when we talk about sports, we celebrate titles, we celebrate accolades, and we don't really get into the mind of that athlete that has experienced the top of the mountain and then has had to start over, literally from scratch. And then not only start over, but start over again and again. And the fortitude that takes, the mental toughness that it takes, I mean, it's truly inspiring. Obviously, Dominick is one of the most dominant athletes in the world, but what you're going to find out from this episode, he's probably one of the most intelligent, introspective athletes I've ever had the opportunity to have a conversation with. So I enjoyed it, just sitting back, getting into the mind of this elite fighter, and I hope you do the same. So sit back, enjoy episode 142 of the RUDIS Wrestling Podcast. Hey, Dominick, I appreciate you jumping on the show today. And, before as I was prepping for the show and getting ready to jump on here, I was like, what's a good way to start this? And obviously with the global pandemic that's going on, everybody's life's interrupted. But as we specifically talk about athletes, this is the world you're living in right now is kind of a world that you've kind of been familiar with for one way or the other, for better, for worse, with the injuries that you've had over the last couple of years. So in a way, you've already lived a life of isolation the last couple of years. And now a lot of your competitors, a lot of your, the fighters that you train and work with, they're living with, for them, it's a new reality, but for you, it's been an existing reality for a couple of years.
That's extremely perfectly on the money, I would say. However, I can't attest to other fighters. I don't really know if this is new for them or not because I don't know these other fighters' lives. All I could tell you is that for me, for sure, you're 100% on the money, that this is not a new situation for me. This is like you said, when I've had, it's not something that I'm proud of, but it's my story. And I have about 6 years, 7 years of injuries interwoven into my athletic story, into my professional story, So yeah, I've had that long to try to fill a gap and then stay relevant and still come back to get to do my passion, to get to be my passion, not just do it, but serve in my passion too. Like, you got to understand that in this place, I get this place that I'm in because I'm not gaining just something for myself. I'm serving a community. I'm serving the MMA community. I'm serving other professional fighters, and not just fighters that are bigger than me, better than me, ranked higher, ranked lower, but also guys that I'm competing against. So, I'm in service to even the guys that want to beat me up, because I get to separate myself from the emotional lock-in of I may compete against them and talk about how great they are, and separate my own feelings and my own thoughts from that, because it's not about me when I'm talking about these athletes. It's about them and their platform, because they're trying to grow their business and their platform just as big as I'm trying to grow my business and my platform. So I kind of always look at it from a community world standpoint rather than what I can get out of a situation. And then I'm involved in that community world situation. And that's how I've gotten through this 6 years is, all right, I'm out. My knees are blown out 3 years in a row. I broke my ulna. I blew my shoulder out. Now, when I'm in this place, how can I serve the community instead of figuring out things that I don't have? And that pulls you out of what you're missing, because we have much more to give than we've ever lost. And when you can shift into that place, you can get out of what you're missing, and you actually have some, it gives you some energy. It gives you some life in the place that you're in, because you have a vision bigger than yourself. And when you have that, now you're connected with the source that gives us power, which is bigger than just me. I can't just keep powering myself up, you know? You have to sometimes tap into something. You know, a phone, when a phone dies, you don't just hold it. You have to plug it into something in order to recharge it. So I was fortunate enough to get into the right mindset and look in the right places to find out that I had to recharge myself by plugging into the community and plugging into the world in order to fill up my battery when I was hurt.
And that's got to be I mean, the way you describe it is very prophetic in some ways, but also this is probably was learned over time, right? Over 6 years of on and off activity, interrupted training, interrupted competition. And I think the life of many elite athletes, it's very self-absorbed and self-consumed. And an element of that is necessary. I mean, if you're going to be the best, right? If you're going to be the elite, a world champion, Olympic champ, whatever your passion is, you know, there's got to be a level that's focused on you and focused on what I need. But also it can be a limiting force too at a certain self. If the purpose is only serving yourself, at some point when it's interrupted and taken away from you, that's got to be I mean, if you're not engaged on a higher level of commitment or a higher level of engagement outside of yourself, and that your passion is taken away from you, that's got to be all of a sudden you're put into a form of isolation. And how do you break out of that?
You nailed it. Exactly. Well said. And that's what happened to me, because I had the same mindset as you. You know, a lot of wrestlers have this mindset. You're told since, you know, elementary, junior high, high school, like, watch out, you know, stay focused, sacrifice. You got to make these things in order to be successful. And I did those things. And like you said, I lived a life of isolation. I legitimately locked myself in a kennel from 11 years old until, man, about probably 26 before when I lost my belt was when I really started to peel, excuse me. When I lost my belt, when I got my belt stripped due to the injuries, is when I really started to peel back the layers that, wow, you are in isolation. And the reason why I knew that is because you don't have the gym anymore. You don't have the training to fill your cup because you're hurt. So you're on the couch, and then you realize that, okay, now all I have is the life that I've created outside of sport and championships and winning and being the best. And when you're hurt, you realize, oh wait, I don't have that life. It doesn't exist. It's not here. And so then you kind of sit and go, hold on a second. Like, how could I be so alone when I'm one of the best fighters in the world, and I have a family and I have a house and I have all these things? Well, it just came down to who am I making a difference for? What's the bigger purpose that I'm really serving? And like you said, you're 100% right. I'm not saying, like, as you start in this sport, start focusing on everybody else and don't focus. That's not the message here. The message here is that I am part of we, but in the word we, there is no I. So it's like, I can't just focus on myself and have all of us part of it. But if I focus on all of us, I am part of that we. And I'm never missing myself if I focus out. So in that place, I've been able to get out of this rut. And it might be hard to understand, but when you're in something like that, you blow your knee out and you resist it. I resisted the knee. I'm going to be back in 6 months faster and stronger than anybody. Just like that's what you say when you first hurt yourself. I'm going to make headlines by coming back and beating people. And then your knee blows out again. So you know, at 6 months, you blow out the same knee for the second time. Then what do? That whole conversation has to be rewritten, because you got to go all the way back to the beginning of the line again. And so you go, hold on a second. How can I just have to restart this? I just did 6 months of therapy. My body's strong. I feel strong. I'm ripped again. I lost all that fat. Now I got to start all over, eat pills again, go through all that pain, and lay on the couch for another 6 months. Like, your brain melts in that moment. because you never really got a break from the rehab, and now you got to go back. You were just getting well. So when you hit that kind of a low back to back, and you're just holding the title, and when you have the title, you press the time, so you press the timer. If it wasn't hard enough already to come back from injury, now press the timer, and you got the UFC breathing down your neck. You got fighters calling you out, saying you're holding up the line. You got all these other intangibles added on to the fact that you have no self-worth because you're not competing, and you haven't filled that gap because all you've done is compete your whole life, and you haven't filled the gap of life yet because all you've done is compete. So it's like there was a lot, and it hits you hard, and you sink or you swim. And in that moment, I had a choice. I could look at that situation as a setback opportunity, or I could be a victim of my circumstance. And, the world wouldn't have been sad of me to be a victim of my circumstances right then. Like, they would understand, like, look, you've done enough. You've been a world champ. You blew your knee out multiple times, bro. Don't worry about it. You're amazing. Good job. It doesn't matter because that wasn't going to sit with me. And so I had to find a way to fill in those gaps. And the things that I'm explaining to you, it's no easy thing to understand. I had to go through a lot of pain in order to see it this way. And I learned that this isn't the only way to do it, but it works. It's not wrong. It's not right to do one or the other. But one thing I can tell you through experience myself is this works. It's not about wrong or right. It's about what works. And this is working, and it's brought me back into the sport, and it's kept me relevant, and to where, people still know that I'm part of this sport, and I'm able to give to the sport. And now that I'm healthy, my last fight, I lost to a guy that lost the title to somebody who was cheating. And I beat the guy that was cheating when I won the title. That same guy that won that I won the title from was cheating. He was taking EPO. TJ Dillashaw was, taking EPO while he was the title holder. And he beat the guy that I lost to on EPO. So that guy loses, and then loses multiple times after. And that was my last shot because I got injured. I blew my shoulder out. I went into that fight with a blown out shoulder and stuff like that, just shot stem cells in it. And then I needed to heal from that after the fight. Well, I ended up needing surgery because the shoulder ended up failing completely after that in the rotator cuff. So now that I've gotten all that fixed and I broke my arm and fixed that, here I am. And I get to get back into the business. I'm still at my peak right now. I'm still very capable of doing this. I was young when I won my first title. I was 26 years old when I won my first world title, and I've defended it multiple times, over 7 times. And, here I am still again. And I look forward to just competing.
It sounds to me, and I think this is a progression that a lot of elite athletes go through. Like at first when they jump in, what you were talking about was understanding how you have to define your purpose. And I think so many athletes on the outset, on the front end of their career, they're looking to achieve a goal or achieve an accomplishment, and that's their tunnel vision. But when they get to that destination, whatever it is, winning a world championship, winning an NCAA title, winning an Olympic title, when they accomplish that goal, they look back and they inventory things and they're left searching. Like this, there's got to be something more to this. There's got to be a purpose, right? Just shooting for something to define myself by a belt or a medal or a title. I mean, that's surface level stuff. At the end of the day, the accolades, the money, that's all great, right? But if you don't have a purpose that you're trying to define your life by, and you're only serving to lead an end game, to lead to a certain accomplishment or goal, it doesn't really, it's lacking, right? And talk about.
That depends on your view of it. It might be lacking to some people, might not be to others, right?
Yeah.
There's a fine line behind, is that lacking or not? And it really comes down to like, how do I feel about this situation? Like, your question is basically like, how do you just have the competition and have the belt or have the title and then be happy with that, basically, right? And you realize that, I don't know how many titles you've won, but I'm sure you've won a few. And when you win, you realize, like, I don't know about you, but when I win my world title, every time I win it, I hold it up and I go, yes. And you have that moment in there and you're just, it is the craziest feeling ever. And the second they drop your hands and you start walking down the stairs out of that octagon, the pain hits you with the reality of they're already matching me up with somebody else. You don't even have this belt that you just won. They already know 5 people that they want to see you lose to. And I'm a bloody mess walking out of the octagon. And so you start thinking, like, what really is this? What the hell is this? I'm going to go to a press conference right now, and all that everybody's going to ask me is who I want to fight next and who could possibly take this from me next. And you're like, yo, did you see what I just did? Like, get away from me and stop asking me who's going to beat me next. Like, shut the hell up. How about I just won a world title and we talk about what I just did? And you don't get that. And when you don't get that, you realize that people just don't care about what you win. They want to see your adversities. And that's why they want to see you lose. They want to see the great fall and if he can still be great. And that's what defines a champion. It's not just being on top all the time. That's the easy part. And you learn that when you lose everything, that you know, that I always looked at it this way when I blew my knees out and I was like, man, you really are defined by this thing, Dom. How pathetic is that you need that belt to have confidence in yourself. You need that belt to be happy. Like, you need to fill the gap, bro. You are sitting here in your own body, just your own body. God gave this to you and you can't do it because you can't get away from it. So what I learned is fighting was an escape out of my own mind, out of my own spirit, out of my own soul. And that's a blip. That can't be that way if you want to be in service to yourself and everybody else. And then I looked deeper into it and I go, what am I really doing when I win a world title? And then I thought about it and I was like, actually, I think that I'm making this bigger. Winning a world title in a professional prize fight, especially an octagon match, like a cage fighting match, for lack of a better term, we'll call it. I feel like people, because it's so hard and such a tiny percentage of the world can really go out and do that the bar gets raised to a lot of athletes or a lot of people in this place, in this realm of fighting, that think that they're doing more than we actually are. And I'm telling you, as a multiple time world champion and a 15-year veteran in this fight game, 15-year plus veteran in this fight game, that all we're doing is smashing something in a cage. We're fighting somebody. Now, is it hard? Yes. Do you have to dig to the depths of hell to have the cardio and the energy to do it? Yes. Do you have to be able to fall down and get back up? Yes. It's a metaphor for so many amazing things in life. It really is. And the toughness and the durability of the human spirit. So I'm not taking that away. That you get to teach the people. But when you really break down what it's doing for us, what is that doing for me? It's showing me how tough I am. It's showing me how durable I am. It's showing me that I can dominate another human being in order to feel in control. But what am I serving? What's the bigger purpose from this fight? I have this huge platform. Everybody wants to watch me compete. What am I doing with it? I'm smashing somebody on a stage for 15 to 25 minutes, and then I'm going home. Or I'm doing that, creating the platform, and then I'm in service to everybody who watches the platform. And I give to the athletes that compete with me and that I get to learn from. Do you understand that in fighting, we're in a 0.5% of the world gets to challenge ourselves, where nobody else in the world gets to challenge themselves. We put ourselves in the most vulnerable position possible in front of millions of people and say, all right, yeah, I could get smashed into a puddle of my own blood in front of all of you. And as an athlete, I'm willing to move into that vulnerable place and do that. And there's a lot to say for that. But there's so much more when you can do that and then be in service after you do that. For me, that's where you start filling in the gaps of, I'm an athlete and now I'm also living life. I'm a human and I'm interconnected with everything that makes us have something. If we don't have an audience, I can't fight. So how does that make me better than the audience? It's like we're all one when you really look at it. Nobody's better than anybody. We all need each other. And that's just how I see it. And that's the mindset that I'm keeping going through this pandemic is who can I be here to serve? Who can I make a difference for? And what am I in gratitude for? And in those places, I can just keep training and keep working and have an uplifted, good spirit, give that to others. And what's really lacking?
Yeah. So it's almost like an expression, like you are living your life as the way you wanted to express it to others. And I think in today's day and age, everybody, that's the thing, like everybody's looking for an excuse. Everybody's looking for an outlet to run the other way and run away from resistance. But, you know, to ascend and jump levels and to connect to people, you've got to lean into those things. And when you lean into those things in the way and on the platform that you're expressing yourself, it's the ultimate form of vulnerability, right? Um, yeah, I mean, to go out there, I don't think people understand that, like, what you're exposing, what you're willing to expose, and the amount of confidence and belief in yourself to go out there to be exposed in the ultimate form. And this is kind of where I wanted to divert, because we're coming from a wrestling split space, where we're coming from as a company and a platform. We're talking about wrestling as a form of combat, but the worst the worst outcome you can get is get your shoulders pressed to a mat, right? Okay, you can recover from that pretty quick because yeah, there's some psychological things and there's some physical things that you'll have to deal with, but in your game, in your sport, you know, you could go out and how do you reconcile that you could either knock someone out or get knocked out? Like that.
I think that it's fair to say, and I can tell you this as a wrestler first, I'm just wrestling with punches. All you wrestlers can do this. It's just a matter of choosing and saying, okay, I am willing to get punched in my face. I am willing to get kicked and take that damage. Once a wrestler chooses that and says, okay, I'm willing, any wrestler can do this. I truly believe that because wrestling is a fight. You just don't get to cheat. See, I get to cheat in my sport, but I'm just wrestling with cheating. I'm elbowing you, I'm kneeing you, I'm kicking you, I'm punching you. I'm just cheating in the middle of a wrestling match. But I filled in those gaps that while I'm cheating, it looks really strategic. But I really view a wrestling match as a fight. I truly do. So to me, my coach always told me it takes a real man to hold another man on his back. And in a lot of ways, it's more embarrassing to get held on your back and pinned than it is to even get dropped and then get back up. Because when you get back up, you can prove like, yeah, I get to keep going. In a wrestling match, once you get pinned, it's proved that you've been dominated. That's as good as a knockout. Your ego, your mind, your spirit, your heart doesn't know the difference between a pin and a knockout. They're the same. It feels the same. So I'm not going to sit here and say that my issues in fighting are going to be higher because our bodies and our minds and our spirits don't see it any different. As a wrestler, when I lost a match, it was absolutely horrible. Ruined my whole week. When I lose a fight, when I get dropped or hurt in practice, it ruins my whole week. I obsess about what mistake I made to create that result all week. It never goes away, that feeling of, needing to win. And it's just a matter of how willing are you able to put yourself in that space? How often are you willing to put yourself in that vulnerable space? And those are the best athletes. And, vulnerability probably isn't the top thing you would think of as a professional prize fighter or even as a wrestler. But when you really break down what's going on, the best wrestlers on earth, the best mixed martial artists on earth, the best combat sports artists on earth have the humility in their souls to put themselves on the line in a vulnerable space to possibly lose. And, I think that's why I think that vulnerability is able to go into because of the faith and the trust we have in ourselves that we're only going to win. And you see a lot of the athletes that have it in their mind that they will only win. That's it. And those are the ones that usually cheat because they will do anything to only win. And I've always looked at losing and winning as equal. I haven't raised winning as, all right, this is right and this is wrong. I've made them equal. And now what can I find in between these if I make them equal? What's the gray area look like? Not winning is right, losing is wrong. When I do that, I make myself feel bad for losing. When realistically, it's like, okay, these are even. And in the gray area, what can I learn from this? And now I can start healing immediately from the loss because I'm not holding it to this wrong standpoint. I'm able to keep it even with winning. And now I can say, okay, I took that loss. Now what can I learn from it? I could take responsibility for it and move forward. But if I don't take responsibility right then, I don't get to heal. And I stay stuck making losing wrong until I finally say, okay, that loss wasn't wrong. And now I can make them even again. But how long does that take? How many matches do you have to lose? How much does that hinder your life in that place until you can make winning and losing pretty similar? And you realize that when this whole thing ends and we're retired, all you'll look back and think is, why was I so scared of losing? I should have just taken the chance. I could have died any day. I could have just died tomorrow. And then I would have said, what was I holding back for? So that's just how I like to look at it.
And that's always the thing. So that's an interesting perspective that I hadn't really thought about, is it's really applying the wrestling mentality into a different exercise. And so we see all these wrestlers with achieving high levels of success, and you defined and got into the mind of the wrestler and the transition into fighting. So do you think it's more the wrestler mentality or the skill set or the skill that they have that transfers in the sport that allows them, or is it a combination of both? It's the mentality of the wrestler's mindset, the skill level, and the combination of those. Does that help in the transition, or is there one that's more important than the other?
For me, I think what makes wrestling the best sport in the world as a base for any sport on earth is a couple things. Sacrifice, focus, consistency, tenacity, mental strength. These are all things that you get in all sports. However, in wrestling, these are things that if you don't have them, you're not successful at all. And it's just like those cross over to life no matter what you do. Those things, the things you learn from wrestling. For instance, what other sport on earth from junior high or elementary school until you're finished do you sacrifice food and water? What sport? Name one. Boxing, maybe. Mixed martial arts now, which is wrestling, which is, basically wrestling almost. So I look at it and you go, you can't find another sport that you have to sacrifice those things at the highest level to be the best. And you have to do that to be the best at wrestling. You have to be able to sacrifice food and water. And those are essentials of life. So when you can get yourself at a young age to sacrifice food and water for a purpose, to create a goal, those are the things that help you survive. You're willing to set aside your livelihood in order to create a goal or a vision. That doesn't leave you. That stays with you if you quit wrestling and move on to a job. That stays with you if you go to football. That stays with you if you go to basketball. That stays with you if you go to ballet. That stays with you if you go to wrestling, soccer. You're a pet groomer. It doesn't matter. Whatever you do, that's a mentality. When you sacrifice food and water for a vision, you've taught yourself that food and water, the only thing that keeps us alive, can be sacrificed, and I can still create something. You teach your brain something that transcends anything, and you've sacrificed it willingly. You didn't do it because you had to. You did it because you chose to. And when you do that for an entire season, and then you get wins and you learn confidence, that transitions to every other walk of life. And I believe that is the core thing that makes not just wrestlers different, but wrestlers into fighters. And wrestlers are different because of those things. I can't think of many other sports that do that. Even boxing, look at wrestlers and go, how are you cutting that much weight? How are you that strong and cutting that? How do you weigh 135 pounds? You walk around at 170. Like, how do you do that? Normal people can't figure that out. It's a very small percentage that are willing to sacrifice that food, water, to be able to put on plastics when you haven't eaten for 3 days and keep running because of a goal. It's not a game. Wrestling is not a game. Wrestling is a fight. Wrestling is, you don't go play the game when you go to a match. You go to a meet and you wrestle for your life. When you go to a fight, you fight for your life. When you go to a basketball game, you're playing a game. When you go to a football game, you're playing a game. When you go to soccer, you're not going to a soccer match. You're playing a game. You're playing a soccer game. You're playing a baseball game. That's what I mean. You can hear it in even the language. Wrestling is not a sport, or not a game. Fighting is not a game. So you got to sacrifice real things in order to be prepared for it. That's food and water, time, energy, sacrifice relationships, sacrifice friendships, sacrifice wants and needs. When you make those decisions young, that kind of thing sticks with you, and it never goes away, and it goes to everything you do. And that's why I think wrestling fits so well with fighting and every other thing you do in life, business. I mean, doing dishes. I don't care. I am positive wrestling can transition to that if you commit to wrestling. You can also wrestle and not commit, and that's how you're going to live your life. Wrestling is a great mirror for your life. However good you are at wrestling is probably about how hard you will try when things get hard in life. It's real.
And you were defining it by talking about consistency, but it's actually it's a lifestyle, right? It's a lifestyle that you have to immerse yourself in. And like you said, we talk a lot of times about there are people who wrestle and then there's wrestlers. The people who wrestle want to dictate how their lifestyle is determined. The wrestler or the fighter, the true fighter, embraces all those things because nobody likes to do everything that it takes to be a champion wrestler or a champion fighter. A lot of people want to, right? And there's a lot of people that can throw themselves in and get laser focused on a goal for a period of time. But to live a lifestyle, that's taking you're not limiting yourself by a time clock, a year or a month. This is what I'm embracing from now until they put me 6 feet under, right? I'm going to continue to live this style of life and apply my mentality to this lifestyle every single day. Not when it just conveniently enters into my space, or I'm hyper motivated to do something, or I'm coming off either a victory or a loss. Those shouldn't deter you or affect your motivation or your inclination to live something if you're truly committed to it. And that's what you're saying. To be consistent, you've got to commit to a certain level of lifestyle. And I think a lot of people, they don't understand everything that entails. I'll take that back. I think most people know what it entails. Very few people are willing to apply that lifestyle regardless of circumstance, right?
Yeah, and you're right. And I think that what it comes down to is a lot of people don't like the feeling of losing, right? You don't like the feeling of being vulnerable and then being proven right that, yeah, you took a chance and now you look like an idiot because you lost, right? But then you got to think deeper, and that transitions to life. You got to think deeper. It's the same thing in life. Like, I don't want to go for this business because what if I don't create it and then I put all my money into it and then I fail? It's like, you see the similarities. So then you got to look deeper and go, okay, why am I scared to lose? What's the issue with losing? Like, why am I holding it like it's this bad thing that can never happen and it's wrong? Let's look at it from another perspective. Let's say you can only win. Everybody in the world now can only win. That's it. There is no loser ever. I'm bored tomorrow. I'm bored now, actually, even saying that I'm bored. I better be able to risk losing. Otherwise, what's the point of this thing? I can't grow without loss. You just can't do it. It's a fact. It's science. So really, I encourage people to take a look at that. Like, look at a life of just winning and no chance of losing ever. How fun would that be? And I encourage you to look at how powerful and how actually enlightening and how nice a loss can be if you look at it from that perspective. because without loss, we're bored. Without the chance of dying, or if we were going to live forever, we would just jump off a bridge. There'd be no fear. It would be no walking the line. There would be no boundaries necessary. It would just be whatever. So I'm thankful for the possibility of loss. I'm thankful for the possibility of, I embrace the fears that I run into when I could be facing loss, because those are the things that you get to surrender to, because we could die tomorrow. So if, let's just say losing is what I'm scared of. In a game, when you play a game, how do you determine who won and who's lost? You look at the score, right? And then whoever's got the better score is the winner. So I always like to look at it in life. If we were to tally up everything in life, how do you know who wins and who loses? In real life, not a game. How do you know who wins and loses in life? You don't. There's no score. We just die or you live. And that's it. So if there's no score and you don't know you could die tomorrow, and no matter what, we're going to lose again. We're going to die. Dying and losing are inevitable. If I lose today, I'm going to lose again in this lifetime. It's no matter what I do, I can't stop that unless I cheat. So I'm not going to cheat. So I'm going to lose. I'm going to die. If you really understand, like, why am I trying to stop loss? Just like, I'm not going to be able to cheat death. It's not going to happen. In a game, you find out who wins by keeping the score. In life, you find out who wins by who's willing to take the most chances without fear of death. Those are the ones that win, because they're not keeping score. They're not keeping tally. They're not trying to stop this thing from happening. They're just being. And that's how I try to be.
And really, I mean, that comes back to what you were saying as far as balancing the ledgers, right? Between wins and losses. When you're trying to seek how you balance those things, it's really the controllables, right? A lot of people project, well, I can't control this. Well, why are you even focused on that? It doesn't matter.
Is control even real? Realistically, what are we actually controlling? It's like everything.
I mean, yeah, like in my mind, and this is what I would always tell my athletes, and it's not a unique thing. I think you hear it throughout the world of sports and any high achievers, like, it's effort and attitude, right? Like, the things that you actually can control in your life every day. It doesn't, because there's variable things. You can look at certain people are like, oh, this guy has so much more talent than me, or this guy has this attribute that's so much better than me. You can't control those things. The only thing that you're absolutely in control of 100% is your effort and your attitude, right? You
saying it yourself. You're responsible for yourself. You can't control so that's what I mean by control is perceived. It's not real, because I can't control anything except me. That's it. So if I'm trying to control this outcome or this loss or this win, it's not real. That's not real. I'm not controlling that. I can only control what you just said, which is what?
Effort and attitude.
And what does that have to do with myself? I can't control somebody else's effort or somebody else's attitude. So what I'm hearing you say is take responsibility.
Yeah, and in turn, what that does, and what most people don't understand, when you apply those things and embrace them, that's where freedom resides. And once you have freedom, you can shed those fears of, what's a defeat going to do to me? Well, if I've focused on and I've controlled those things and I have freedom in my life, a loss isn't going to scare me. A loss is only going to embolden me and encourage me to dive in deeper to what I say I believe and how I'm living my life, right?
Yep. And that's it. And if you are defined by your wins and losses, then that's what it's going to feel like when you lose. So that's a reality check for you. That's a mirror. If when you lose, your whole world melts and you want to go into a little hole and just die and cry on yourself and you have no self-worth, that's a good mirror for you. What a lesson you get to learn from that loss, that it melts you that badly. No loss should do that, because we should be thanking ourselves for the loss, because we can't win everything. This is life. We're going to lose again. 100% fact. We'll never be able to control that. But I mean, it might not be in sport, but it's going to be a loved one, or it's going to be this job opportunity, or it's going to be, anything. We're going to lose something again. We're going to have that feeling again. We can't stop it. So what's the point of trying to control it? I encourage and I invite to surrender to it.
Yeah, because it really is. I mean, the fear of failure is always much worse than the failure itself. And I think as long it seems like a simple thing, but it's absolutely a truth that you're only accountable to the person that the reflection you see in the mirror. And as long as you can stare yourself down and answer the tough questions to yourself, not to anybody else, it doesn't really matter, right? People are going to ask you questions, and they're going to try and infuse some level of accountability outside yourself. But really, as long as you're looking yourself and as long as you're able to stare yourself down in a mirror, that's all you want, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's going to reflect to all the people asking the questions in the end anyway. So correct.
Yeah. So I wanted to transition a little bit and talk about the actual training and break down and jump into how you break down your camps, how you prepare for a fight. Because I think it's a fascinating insight into how your mind works outside of there's X's and O's that are applied into the fight camp and leading up to that, but breaking that down, the components outside of the training itself. When you apply that, when you start breaking down your camps, at this point, you have to have it down to pretty much a science at this point. The duration, you know, the intensities in certain phases, the periodization in your training, the recovery aspects, the nutritional disciplines that you have to apply to your life. All these things I think are really fascinating because this is what this show is trying to help lead people and get them to a high level of understanding of how critical the small things are in the sport. I think a lot of times we look at, how many times you're hitting a guy in a day, which is important in the techniques you're applying when you're striking a guy. But outside of that, what are the fundamental things that go into a successful fight camp?
Well, realistically, it's just like you said. You pretty much nailed it, man. It's very similar to wrestling. You got the periodization. You got to get the weight down. You got to get in shape. I usually do an 8-week training camp, but for instance, I got a situation now with this virus going on. I mean, look at this UFC 249's getting ready to come up. We had the potential of seeing one of the best wrestlers that I've ever seen walk the planet in Khabib Nurmagomedov. And now he's out, and all these things are flipping and switching. And that's the reality of a prize fight, is that anything can flip on a day's notice. So you do your best to prepare for one style, but realistically, I'll get myself in shape for the first 4 weeks of any fight. And then I don't even start game planning for a specific style until the last 3-4 weeks, because somebody could get hurt or pulled out or move. Mm-hmm. So I just get my body to be a well-oiled machine in the first 4 weeks of the 8-week camp. And then the second 4 weeks, I focus on technique, timing, speed, getting that push from round 1 to round 5 or round 1 to round 3, getting my body adjusted to, am I fighting 3 rounds or fighting 5 rounds? What kind of pace do I need to keep? What's my punch count? Blah, 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 blah. So there's a lot of things, but realistically, it just comes down to, yeah, I've done this a million times, but something can always change. And like I said, in this pandemic situation, there's a possibility of me maybe getting to fight Henry Cejudo May 8th, against on the card that he was supposed to fight Aldo. And the reason is Aldo's locked out of the country. Peter Yan's locked out of the country. Peter Yan's in Phuket training, and Aldo's in Brazil, and you can't get into the country. And so Henry Cejudo recently called me out because he knows that I'm the fight to make. Of all the fighters here in the States, I'm in shape. I'm ready to go. I told him that's the fight to make, and he knows that, and that's why he's called me out twice. Now the next step is he calls me out, but then you see him talking to Cody Garbrandt about 125 too, and it's like Henry's called me out before, and then he just, all right, I'm going to fight Aldo. So I don't really believe anything Henry says, because I don't think Henry knows what he believes. I think Henry's a very lost individual in personal life. I think as a combat athlete, when you put him on the mat, put him in the octagon, he's on. That's his place. That's where he resides. That's where you see who he is. But outside of that, if you take him outside that octagon, he is a lost little boy. And that's what you see in his call outs and these people that he's like chasing butterflies everywhere, just trying to get attention. And it's like, listen, man, pick a fight and stick to it. And let's do this already. This is your second time calling me out. Are you going to follow through? Because I know Dana will make this fight tomorrow. We got 1 month. Let's go, man. Stop hopping around all these people trying to get clout. So what he'll do is, it's smart. You got to give him this because he loves attention, clearly. He'll call me out and then let go of it. And then he'll call out and then he'll talk to Cody and then he'll talk to this guy and he'll get everybody talking about him and not follow through on any of it and just have a bunch of empty words. Makes sense if you know Henry, the lost little boy outside of the octagon. Now, in the octagon, he turns on. I'll give him full respect. On the mat, he turns on. That's him. Outside, he's just so confused, and it's confusing for everybody else too. So things like that are what you got to lock into and understand that there's a lot of intangibles. You don't know what's going to happen in the fight game. You don't. Like, Henry could call me out and then change his mind and say, oh, never mind. I'd rather fight Aldo because Moraes beat Aldo and I beat Moraes, so maybe I should go for that fight. Oh, maybe I'll fight this guy because he's got this. Like, you got to pick and go. And you don't know if somebody's gonna make the fight or not. Even if I make the fight with Henry, he could still, something could happen. So realistically, you just gotta not attach to anything. Be open to everything, attached to nothing, and flow. Let the flow happen. Let the universe take charge. Trust and have faith, and things are gonna happen the way they're supposed to. And then I just make myself in sick shape, ready to fight, ready to go, and that's what I can control myself.
So with that, at the end of the fight camp, all those things, are there any additional things like, okay, these are the boxes I need to check at the end of the camp? It doesn't matter. I can't, like you said, I can't really focus. At a certain point, I've got to focus on an opponent, but what are the benchmarks that I got to check? Where do I need to be physically, mentally, cardiovascularly, spiritually leading up to a fight?
There's no need to be. Everybody's got their own, man. Like, look at, that's what's so cool about this. It's mixed martial arts. There's no one way. There's a million ways from all over the world. This is a sport where we're bringing people from China. We're bringing people from Brazil, Russia, India, South Korea. Like, the list goes on. We've got people from all over the planet, and everybody has a different belief. Everybody thinks something different. And in all those different ways, there's a success story in each one. So who's to say what's wrong and right? It's a matter of what works for you.
And I think that's the biggest journey that everybody needs to learn how to define in themselves is what works for me. Because I look at you and I look at your fighting style, and I kind of put myself back in the mind of a wrestling coach. I'm like, how the heck do I game plan for this guy? Like, he is so unpredictable. There's a rhyme or reason behind what you do, and you understand it, as you said, like, you've found out your why and why you do certain things. But to game plan for you, I think, would be one of the hardest things to do, because you don't give anybody one consistent thing to look at for a period of time to time up. You're always switching and altering things. How did you learn to develop your fight game and your skill set? Because it's so unique, and it doesn't follow a certain formula. I mean, there's elements that you can draw on it, but it's almost like a guy that I used to do a podcast with, and he's still with us, Ben Askren. Like, when you looked at his wrestling style, it was so unconventional. It's like, how do I really prepare for this guy? And in certain ways, when I look at you and I look at your fighting style, I'm like, man, it's so unique. How did you become this version of yourself?
I thought really hard, and I got punched in the face a lot. And you'd be surprised what you figure out when you're getting punched. I mean that. I know it sounds silly, but like, when you're tired of getting your nose bloody and your lips fat and black eyes and your face hurts and your body hurts, you find adjustments. How's that different from life? How many times you do something stupid in life and you either adjust or you do it again? And in fighting, when you do it again, you get your nose smashed in. So you learn experientially every day what works and what doesn't. And nobody's there to make an excuse for you, because every time you try, you get punched in the face again. So it's just a reality check every day. So I can make excuses or I can make adjustments. I always make adjustments.
Okay, so this is more just a literal statement. Like, I think I've talked to a lot of guys, and especially being in the wrestling space, a lot of people talk like, "Oh, I could go into MMA." And you talked about previously about how you apply the wrestling mentality. You're fighting, you're just taking a fight into a different form. But I think a lot of wrestlers think, "Well, I could punch somebody in the face. I could punch somebody and knock them unconscious." But on the flip side of that, I don't think a lot of wrestlers or a lot of people jumping into MMA is like, think about the pain that they have to absorb and receive to get to the point where I can hit this guy back and possibly knock him out. How many guys say, "I want to get into this," and then they quickly figure out, "I don't want to deal with this type of pain."
I couldn't give you the how many, but they figure it out on their own. And they don't, you just do, man. You just get out. And I would say, if you're new and you're trying to come into the sport, the things to look at aren't, can I knock somebody out? Can I win? The questions to be in are, how bad will it hurt when I kick somebody in the body and I kick them in the elbow instead of the body and my shin breaks and I got to keep fighting? Because I was supposed to be kicking them and hurting them, and I hurt myself trying to hurt them. There's one dimension. Or I punch them in the head and my hand breaks. I just hit him and he didn't go down. In this story in my head, he went down when I hit him, when actually my hand broke and his head, and he stayed up. What do I do now? Here's another level. Don't picture winning, picture getting hit and how you're going to take it. Because that's what a fight is. In wrestling, you can go in and be perfect. You can. In fighting, no matter how perfect you are, you're going to get hit somewhere, unless it's a one punch knockout, which is, what's the percentage of those, not very high, not all the time for some people, but it's like, that's what I look at. All right. When I watch fighters, when I look for guys that are going to be good, I go, all right, how does he take a punch? How does he take a beating? And when he gets hurting somebody else, how does he handle it? Those are the intangibles. All the other stuff is what everybody thinks about. Oh, I can hit hard. I'm faster than him. I wrestle better than him. I'm cool. I'm going to take all that conversation out of your head as soon as I start hurting you, because I can take pain more than you. So the best athletes on earth, it's a pain threshold and a push threshold as well. Who can push harder? Who can deal with more pain while you're pushing hard? While I'm the best athlete in the world, while I have the drive and the want and the dedication and the passion to win. It's so much poured into one bucket to win that this is the hardest sport in the world right now and the fastest growing sport on earth. And wrestling is a martial art. And I learned that by being able to transition to fighting. And mixed martial arts is now giving a breeding ground to wrestling to call it a martial art. For so long, you call jiu-jitsu matches a fight. Like, you hear jiu-jitsu guys, they say, oh yeah, I'm going to go have a fight. Like, no, you're having a jiu-jitsu match. It's not a fight, because otherwise we would call a wrestling match a fight, but we don't, because I don't know, we just don't need that pride. Same reason we don't need a belt system. We know we're good, or we know we're not. We don't need belt systems. We don't need to be told that you're in a fight. It takes a real man to hold another man on his back. That's the end of the story for wrestling.
Nice. So it seems a lot like it's kind of the old Mike Tyson quote. Everybody's got a game plan until they get punched in the face. And in wrestling, a lot of times what I've seen from the elite level guys is they have the capacity and the ability to make in-match adjustments, because for the majority of guys at high levels of all sport, the preparation is the same. But when they get engaged in the game is where they actually define their greatness, because they have the ability to adjust and adapt on the fly. Their game plan isn't executed perfectly, and then they have to make adjustments. Some people can do that. Some people can't, right? So how did you learn to apply that into fight when the first time you got in the cage and all of a sudden it's like, oh, this was what we planned for? How did you adapt that first time when that game plan got kicked out the window?
Well, when the game plan gets kicked out the window, I've already been putting myself in all those positions. So in wrestling, how do you do it? You put yourself in every bad position you could possibly be in until there's no bad position. That's it. So I do that in fighting. That means I got to fight several people and feel a lot of loss in practice, so that if I get put in those losing situations where I'm getting punched in the face, I'm, as crazy as it might sound, I'm used to it. I know I'm going to eat a couple on the way up, and that's okay, because after I escape here, I'm going to get those back with this, this, and this. So there's just knowing different stuff. But what you said is key. And I got to go because I have a dentist appointment. So I want to end with this point is, we'll close out with this point is, it's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. That's Darwin, right? We all know that. That's what you were just explaining in a wrestling match that made the best wrestlers. It's the ones that can adapt mid-match. It's the ones in these viruses that can adapt to the new circumstances, the new ways of living without trying to resist and keep things the way they were. It's the ones that know how to move into a responsive change rather than try to hold on to what was. That's the same thing in wrestling. You can have your set moves and try to hold on to those set moves, but sometimes you're going to get into a situation that those set moves aren't going to work, and you need to be able to respond to the change and adjust. And those make the best wrestlers, those make the best fighters, and that makes the best, most successful people in life as well, I believe. And especially in a pandemic like this, I encourage and invite everybody to be in that mindset.
Awesome. Well, hey, Dominick, I appreciate you taking the time. Good luck. We've been itching to see you getting back in the cage. Hopefully we see that as this pandemic.
Smash up Henry if he actually takes it. And if this fight goes on in May, keep watching the headlines, guys. We're going to make this happen. If there's a venue, I'm determined. I'm telling you, we're going to make this fight happen. Henry's ready to fight me. He doesn't like me. And you know, I don't like or dislike him. I just think he's a little bit lost outside of the octagon, but that doesn't matter here nor there, because in the octagon we'll be locked in there, and I encourage everybody to keep a lookout.
Beautiful. Thanks, Dominick.
Have a good day.
All right. We'll see you.